I know that.
Oh, see what I said? Oh yeah, Maya Matsuoka.
And Timothy Langley. Phew. That was a nice
Snap
segue.
to.
A snap to, yes. Good morning, Timothy, once again, and good morning to everybody watching us and listening to us. Well, we already said good morning to everybody in Clubhouse, and now it is once again very nice to have you all with us on YouTube and LinkedIn, Facebook as well. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One, episode 210 with the CEO of Langley Squire, that is the government affairs agency in downtown Tokyo. The CEO, Langley, Timothy Langley. I was going to say Langley Squire, but no, Timothy Langley. So, Timothy, really thank you so very much for tuning in, being on time. It's very important. And hopefully the weather will hold so that it's not going to rain upon you today. Here we go. Now it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. Good morning, everybody, and thank you again for joining us for the 210th episode of Japan Politics One-on-One, where we report to you on what's going on in Japanese politics.
Oh, okay.
And if you were attending last week, you noticed a little bit of the instability of the Wi-Fi. So we figured out that if I take my iPhone and I hoist it up to the mast and I tether it to my iPhone and I'm on the deck of the good ship Grimm's, the Wi-Fi is improved. So we're still experimenting with this to our new studio here on the good ship Grimm's. But it just turned out that it's a little bit sprinkling today. So I'll still try and report to you without melting and try and get through this briefing on what's going on in Japanese politics so that we can get right to the heart of this, which is the question and answers that you're feeding to Maya. Maya's already got a couple of that are lined up. But let's get right to it. You know, Mr. Ishiba returned from Washington, D.C. just a week ago, and the polls were immediate that he had a bump in his popularity, I might say, his approval rating. And if you were in the meeting with him and Trump thought he was the best thing since, peanut butter. He's handsome, he's powerful, he's well respected at home. Mr. Abe spoke so highly of him. He's going to be a great leader for Japan. So people listen to that sort of thing. And coming from an individual like Trump, it does carry some weight. So he came back with, a lot of trepidation going into this meeting, but he came back, I think, rather victorious and a huge sigh of relief. And he reported to the Diet, the plenary session on Wednesday, and talked about the issues that they discussed. We can get into that a little bit later. There are only 13 days left until March 2nd. This is the end of the Diet. It's the end of the deadline for the lower house to pass the budget to the upper house. That gives the upper house 30 days to consider the budget that was promoted by the lower house and either pass it or decline it. But as you all know, because you've been fastidiously watching this program, if the upper house does not approve the budget, it falls back to the lower house's decision and it becomes law. So although the upper house gets to vote on it, it's the lower house that actually carries the weight. And that's why there's so much focus now. And that's why the deadline of March 2 is so important, because that's the deadline that the lower house must pass the budget. There's been some great horse trading that's been going on just over the last 2 days. It's just been really remarkable. Isshin no Kai has insisted on free education for secondary schooling. The Democratic Party for the People has insisted on raising the floor for non-tax salaries, and the Constitutional Democratic Party is submitting its own budget, and the LDP and Komeito are thinking, which way do we go with this? We've got to have the budget passed, and I need collaboration with one of these three opposition parties. So in other news, the Abe faction accountant failed to show up as pretty much predicted. He is not a member of the Diet, so although the budget chairman can insist that he shows up, it doesn't have really the authority to force him to. And I think with the Constitutional and Democratic Party leading and holding the chairmanship of that powerful committee, I think he's pretty much just given up on trying to hammer the LDP with the accountant showing up, and he's moved on to bigger and better things. So I don't know if we'll hear much more about that, but the LDP does end up with a little bit of egg on its face, and with the looming elections in the upper house coming up within the next 5 months, this is something that they need to dispel or rectify somehow. The LDP and Komeito are also in negotiations on how they're going to handle candidates that they support in the upper house election. The Komeito party, their coalition party, did allow the LDP to run in certain election districts that they didn't run in, and the LDP reciprocally allowed the Komeito to run in certain election districts that they wouldn't run in, thereby enhancing their possibility of winning those seats. It happened in 2016. It happened in 2022. In 2022, they didn't get all of the accommodations that they sought. And now they're regretful for that, because many of the people that they allowed to run in those election districts were on the take. They were receiving some of the money from the scandal, the payback scandal. And now they're thinking it's not such a good idea. We're supposed to be the clean government party. So that is unsettled at this point in time. But the point here is that the LDP and Komeito, they're struggling to keep this coalition together. And I don't know, it's fraying on the insides, and it's something to keep an eye on. The other issue to keep an eye on is the surname issue. When two people get married, generally the couple takes the male's name, and the koseki is adjusted accordingly. She falls into his koseki, and her last name disappears, and her children take the last name of her father. And that is a big controversy right now. It is actually, there are many people within the LDP on the right side who are opposed to this. They want to keep it where the male name survives. And so this rift inside the LDP is really beginning to take a disproportionate sway inside the LDP. So there could be something of a split even within the LDP on this particular issue. It doesn't sound like it's such a hard issue, but it really is, and it's coming up to be something really difficult. I'm getting there, Maya. I can hear you clicking away. Shunto negotiations, the spring offensive for wage negotiations is in full swing. We reported this last week, and the union for Toyota workers has insisted on a 6.28% increase. That is the largest increase that they have demanded. And I think, given the tariff trepidation, the tariff threats from the United States, and the automobile sector of the economy being so large, I think the trade union might be able to squeeze in even a 6% raise. So it looks like this will go on for another 2 months before it's finally settled, but it's still going rather strong. The Agricultural Ministry has decided to release stockpiles of rice because the price of rice has risen so precipitously, not only because of production costs, but also because producers are hoarding rice in anticipation of rising rice prices. So this is also a reflection of what's going on in the economy, with the prices of fresh foods shooting up more than 18% over the last 12 months, and the yen suffering also. I didn't tell you about the yen. The yen closed out on Friday at 152.33. As you will recall, since you were here last week, it closed out at 151. Stronger, that means it's more valuable the lower the number is. It closed out at 151, 5 weeks where it was beginning to make this incremental strength going down towards 150. It is now bumped up a little bit, and that's probably a reflection of the Ishiba trip to Washington, D.C. and the threat of tariffs increasing. There's more to get into, but I want to turn it on back over to Maya before she burns a hole in my forehead by staring at me like that. And then we can get into the beef of the deals. Maya?
Thank you so very much, Timothy. I just wanted to read a joke to you by Christopher in Clubhouse. And
Okay.
Christopher, really, you got it. Thank you for the joke. So Christopher writes, I thought Timothy fell off the boat. Admit it. All of you have been watching waiting to secretly see that for a long time now.
Christopher has put voice to the thoughts that you have expressed to me time and time again about falling off the boat or
Right.
being
Yes.
pushed off the boat.
And it's important because I cannot voice these thoughts, it's so much better
It's
when
undiplomatic, yes.
and diplomatic. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Christopher and Timothy. Thank you so very much. Well, before we continue, I want to say thank you for our first sponsor, Kanchu, that is Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku, or as they're well known in Yokohama and the area, Kanchu. You can find them online at kanacho.com. And if you have any projects in mind in buying and selling real estate or real estate investment or property management, Kanacho is, well, they're your guys. You know, probably you have met James before, James Howell. He's available at james@kanachu.com. He speaks English and he has colleagues who speak Japanese. So bilingual services are their strength, and the customization of their services is also another strength of theirs. So if you have any projects in mind, please reach out to James. Timothy, well, now it's over to you again. And I don't know. We have a lot to talk about today. If we get more jokes, I'll read them to you once again.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, thank you again for tuning in. And you might notice that we constantly are changing things. I was reporting from inside the saloon last week, and people told us that there was trouble with the audio and some of the video that was coming out. So we've changed things a little bit so that we can do it on deck. The weather, I think, will hold out, but I think from now on we'll be doing it on deck because the Wi-Fi is stronger here. So if you have ideas about how we can improve this, including changing the main speaker, we're all ears for that. Or maybe as the weather improves, actually jumping off the boat and into the water and satisfying some of your latent desires to move this briefing into something a little bit more exciting. But let's go into what happened this last week. The biggest news is, well, there are two big news. One is that Mr. Ishiba came back from Washington, D.C. about this time last week and had a very good meeting with President Trump. And as you know, when he travels in a visit like this, it wasn't a state visit. It was a one-day meeting that included many of his cabinet appointees. And they talked about defense, they talked about the economy, they talked about trade, they talked about tariffs, they talked about steel, they talked about a lot of different things. But the main focus there was Mr. Ishiba sitting there with Mr. Trump, and he did surprisingly well. He looked good, he looked healthy, affable, and I think the chemistry between the two of those leaders was pretty remarkable. And they complemented each other. I think, as history has told us, ingratiating yourself with President Trump involves, words of praise and acknowledgement and that sort of thing. And so the presentation by Mr. Ishiba was full of that. They didn't talk too much about details, more about feeling and moving forward and the relationship between Japan and the United States, which is remarkably strong. I think Japan remains to be the United States, one of the United States' strongest allies. And even with the announcement of tariffs on steel and aluminum, I think Japan is still going to come out relatively unscathed. NHK immediately initiated a poll last week, and the reports came out on Monday. And as you can imagine, the approval rating for Mr. Ishiba jumped about 10 points from approval to disapproval. For approval, he jumped from 39% approval to 44%, and the disapproval rating fell 5 points from 40% to 35%. So there is a good uptick in the appreciation for what he's doing, and it tells you maybe that the population or the polling, the people who are called to poll are somewhat fickle, but they are influenced, and the yen is influenced by that too. So you can take all of these things into consideration and come to the same conclusion that I do, that Mr. Ishiba, he does have a fighting chance now. He succeeded in establishing some sort of rapport with President Trump. The other two things that he must do as prime minister if he wants to survive is, number one, he needs to form some sort of a viable relationship with one of the opposition parties so that he can fill that gap of 13 votes so that they can pass the budget. And the second thing he has to do is he must pass the budget. He's got less than 2 weeks to do it. And there has been some real change that's happened just on Friday. Friday was a very important day. So how he is going to survive after April 1st is going to be determined in these next couple of days. The cabinet approval, GG Press, is usually a little bit more stringent. The first numbers I was giving to you was from NHK, which is some would say a government mouthpiece. It is it reports to, or it is the leader of NHK is appointed by the prime minister. GG Press is a lot more critical of the government, and they came out with an approval rating of the cabinet, not the prime minister, just of the cabinet, of steady at 28.5%. The danger zone is 30%, as you know. When a prime minister and the administration is below 30%, that is considered in the danger zone. They have been in the danger zone ever since Mr. Ishiba has taken over. The disapproval rating for the cabinet is at 40%, so he's not out of the woods yet. There was a breakthrough on Friday. We've been talking about that. The Isshin no Kai has been talking with the Komeito and trying to figure out how they can figure out some deal so that the LDP likes them more than they like any of the other opposition parties. And Isshin no Kai, you know, their issues there is they have the the expo that begins in less than 3 months in Osaka. This is a big deal. It's the world's trade fair. And it actually was a topic of conversation in the Ishiba-Trump meeting. But they want to have free education, secondary education up to high school for all people, private schools, public schools. They want to increase the amount of money the government spends for each individual to go to school. And that is pretty much their play to appeal to voters. The Democratic Party for the People is a little bit different. They're coming in, they're saying that the lowest rate where people should be taxed is key to gross domestic product and some other factors. And that number has been pegged for the last 15 years by the LDP at 1.2%. I'm sorry, 1.2 million yen per year. And the current amount and the amount that the Osaka government acknowledges for people in that prefecture is 1.78. And the Democratic Party for the People has insisted to the LDP to raise it up to that level. And this ploy is to appeal to more people in the lower income brackets, but also to appeal to other people that the Democratic Party for the People is for the people. So when the election comes up, vote for us because we're looking out for you. We're not money grubbing. We're not taking money, putting it in our pocket and not reporting it to the tax authorities. We are clean. We're not the clean government, but we're even better than them. So vote for us. And then alternatively, you've got the Constitutional Democratic Party, which is the largest Democratic Party, the largest opposition party by far, maybe 3 or 4 times bigger than Isshin no Kai, which is the second largest opposition party. Their ploy is a little bit different. They came up with their own budget proposal that they submitted on Friday. The LDP took their budget proposal and said, well, this is very interesting. We should consider this. We see there is a lot for us to digest. And I think what they have done, Mr. Noda brilliantly has come in, given the LDP an option to coalesce with by accepting the budget proposal or largely accepting their budget proposal and moving forward in 10 days to pass the budget. Even before the 10 days passes, they could do that. So what has happened, in fact, should this move forward, and I think it will, is that the Constitutional Democratic Party under Mr. Noda has essentially snookered the Isshin no Kai and the Democratic Party for the People. I think in retrospect, Mr. Tamaki and Mr. Maida might have overplayed their hand, that the LDP was so desperate for these 13 additional votes. We can squeeze them a little bit more. Let's push it to the deadline. Let's brinksmanship this deal. And the Constitutional Democratic Party swooped in on Friday. They said they were going to do this in any event, provide their own budget. It has never happened in 29 years that an amendment to the budget has been submitted to the Congress has succeeded. And not only will this one likely succeed, but it is mostly the budget that is being promoted by the Constitutional Democratic Party. It'll be blended together over the next couple of days and likely submitted, and the LDP, Komeito, and the Constitutional Democratic Party will vote for it, clearly eclipsing the 13 votes that is needed. But also in the budget, the Constitutional Democratic Party has accommodated Isshin no Kai's demand for education and paying for food and lunch services, that sort of thing, making the cost of education cheaper all around, but also to raise the floor of the non-tax salaries per year. So it looks like this is going to move forward. Mr. Noda is coming out smelling sweet, and I think that you're going to find a breakthrough in the budget negotiations. Things are going to happen very quickly now over the next 2 weeks. So please stay tuned. Next week, don't miss this show because there's going to be a lot to report there too. As everybody knows, if you read the newspaper or not living under a rock, President Trump has come up with several tariff initiatives. One of them is a tariff he initiated against Canada and Mexico, 25%. They renegotiated that. He gave them 30 days to think about it. He's not going to implement it if they do a couple of things related to trade and immigration and fentanyl. He also initiated tariffs on steel and aluminum just this last week. He is moving at lightning speed. And that's going to hurt Japan because Japan produces lots of steel, lots of high-grade steel and aluminum, and exports it throughout the world, not only to the United States, but also to Mexico, where there's a lot of Japanese manufacturing that goes there and takes advantage of the the U.S.-Mexico trade deal, and thereby selling products that are made in Mexico into the United States. Those tariffs are going to hurt that trade as well. This really sets off alarms in Kasumigaseki. They're trying to see if they can carve some sort of a deal where, like in Canada and Mexico, there's a hiatus. They don't impose these tariffs on steel and aluminum. But beyond that, Mr. Trump came up days later, I think on maybe Thursday, with reciprocal tariffs, which means that if I sell something to you and you have a tariff on that, and you sell something to me and I have a tariff, I'm going to make sure that those tariffs are equalized somehow. And with Japan in the situation that it is, I mean, it imports all of its fuel needs, all of the energy needs that it has, and the United States exports it. There is a tax and a tariff on that, but for the Japanese, they are importing the fuel and energy, not just from the United States, but from the United States as well, but also lots of foodstuffs too. And if there's a reciprocal tariff that is being added, Japan has a higher tariff on U.S. products than the United States has on Japanese products. And just to be a little bit more specific there, let me give you a couple of facts here. In 2023, Japan exported 213 billion yen worth of food items. That's 1% of Japan-U.S. trade. They imported 1.8 trillion yen, 14% of Japan-U.S. trade. So although they exported food items to the United States, that accounted for only 1% of Japan's total exports to the United States. Whereas in the import round, they imported maybe almost 8 times more foodstuffs from the United States, which was about 14% of what they import from the United States. Auto parts and automobiles account for 1/3 of the trade between Japan and the United States. That's enormous. The automobile industry supports the Japanese economy. 1/3 of their the exports to the United States is in autos and auto parts. In fact, that consists of about 1.6% of U.S. trade to Japan. So although 1/3 of all of the trade from Japan is in autos, 1.6%, I mean, that's a huge difference, of U.S. auto parts and automobiles come to Japan. And for the United States, that accounts for only 1.4% of total trade between the two countries. So the amount of tariffs that potentially could be implied for this, it's sector by sector, but overall, Japan tariffs U.S. products about 3.4%. The United States tariffs overall Japan about 1.3%. And if you were going to equalize that, that's going to have a huge impact on the cost of goods and services that are being exchanged overall. The digital trade between the United States and Japan is just enormous. The amount of money that is spent on digital trade, that means money that is being paid to the United States through internet services, music fees, videos, whatever you're paying for by a credit card from the United States, Google or Microsoft, that sort of thing. That amount of money is equal to the amount of money that Japan spends on oil each year. So it's an enormous amount, and it's a trade deficit. The amount of money being spent by Japan, the United States purchasing digital trade from Japan. So there's a huge imbalance there as well. So who knows how that's going to shake out? But over the next 2 weeks, we're going to figure that out. Japan needs to really bolster up and repair the economy. The economy has been in the doldrums for the last 22 years, as everybody knows. It's still trying to figure its way out. And one of those ways is figuring out a new industry that they can focus on. One is chips with Rapidus, and what's going on in Kumamoto with TSMC, but also for developing different industries, including the defense industry that is being considered. So there was no discussion about Japan raising its defense expenditures in the Trump-Ishiba meeting, but there was a discussion that these the amount of investment from Japan to the United States will increase on par with what the projections are. So it's not like he's going to invest much more, but I think Mr. Ishiba did commit that it will be steady and on course. The news reported that he would be investing an additional trillion yen in U.S. investments, but I think that is just the accumulated annual projection for 2026. So it's a lot of that is just marketing and promotions. But in any event, I think the relationship between Japan and the United States is still in somewhat flux. Kasumi Gaseki is working on that, and there's still a lot of things that are undecided right now. But everybody's working their brain muscles to try and figure this thing out under the new administration of Donald Trump, and it doesn't just stop with trade and reciprocal tariffs and aluminum and steel. It also includes what's going on with Ukraine and also in Gaza. These are two areas that the Japanese government has committed very strongly to under the encouragement of the Biden administration, and keeping the Paris climate accords and following those and investing accordingly. So these new changes affect Japan in very significant ways. And with the new administration, I think everybody understands you want to be in lockstep. You want to be accommodating what the President of the United States requests or suggests, because as everybody knows, when the United States sneezes, Japan catches a cold. So the repercussions are pretty immediate. We reported a couple of weeks ago on Shohei Ohtani, his interpreter, who had pilfered and squirreled away some money from the Dodgers pitcher and more famously their batter. He just signed a $700 million 10-year contract. But as he was working up to this, he had a interpreter who traveled with him on the news all the time. You always saw the two of them together. Ippei Mizuhara had a gambling addiction, and over the 2 years that he and Otani were together, and Otani's star was rising spectacularly, he pilfered $17 million, supposedly without Shohei Otani noticing it. That does stretch a little bit of credibility, but that's the story. He was arrested and convicted of bank fraud. Bank fraud in the United States involves a 30-year maximum prison term. The sentencing for Mizuhara was last week. I apologize, I didn't report it last week, but he received almost 5 years, 4 years and 9 months of jail time, and the order for restitution of $18 million, $17 million to repay to Mr. Otani, and then $1 million in IRS fees and legal fees. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to come up with that, but in less than 5 years, he is expected to be out of jail and probably kicked out of the country. He's made application for permanent residency, and that will obviously be denied. And probably after he finishes his jail term, be coming back to Japan. But anyway, I wanted to tie that up. It does have some impact on U.S.-Japan relations, very minor, but since I reported on the Super Bowl last week, I figured it was only appropriate. Maya, that finishes it up for what's going on in Japanese politics that is of most burning importance. And I'm sure there are other issues that will come up that we can discuss more roundly in the Q&A period. But thank you very much, and I'll try to remain on board as we go through the Q&A. I love it when you do this. When your microphone is off, it just warms my coddles. There we go.
I didn't want to be told off because of strangling my cat while you were talking. So okay, so thank you very much for this. Please do not fall off board, at least for the next 30 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
And then, yes, and after that, yeah, you can do as you please. But before we go into the questions and answers, I would like to once again say thank you very much to our other sponsor, and this is Houze Inc. Well, if you have watched some of our other episodes, you already know the name of Houze. Houze is another company that deals in custom home design and construction. They also do commercial building construction, and they're based in Yokohama. They do also offer bilingual services, and you can connect with them via the email which is listed here, or by connecting with Hana Urushizawa Howell on LinkedIn. You will find her contact details in the description of the video on YouTube. So please do not hesitate. We have been working with them for a while, and we can only say thank you for giving us this opportunity to promote you here on this podcast, because there are no better sponsors to promote here. So thank you very much for this. And Timothy, we're moving on now into the Q&A session. So I'll start with, the first question that came from Manabe-san this morning. So here it is. Does it look like a political dispute or a policy decision made through dialogue? This question came when you were talking about the CDP and also the other parties and the LDP, how they were interacting at the moment in the Diet with the budget in view, and also the other policies that the opposition parties want to have voted.
So that's a difficult question. I think what Manabe-san is getting at is there's two ways to go about this. One is the Constitutional Democratic Party forms a coalition with the other opposition parties, and then we attack the LDP. We kick the bums out. We take over. I'll do this. You get this cabinet position. We divide it up, and we become kind of friends. We become frenemies, but at least the LDP is out. That's one option. The other option is the one that has been pursued up until now, which was, if you're the Constitutional Democratic Party, let's try and figure out a way that we can work with the LDP so that our star shines and we ride on that. The other parties, like the Ishin no Kai, does the same thing. They only need 13 votes. We have more than 13. So if we coalesce with them, if we agree to that, we can get this, and then when the election comes up, people are going to like us much more. So there's that competition. And I think what the Constitutional Democratic Party did was they just undercut all of the other opposition parties, and they went in and they said, let's have a coalition. We will submit our budget proposal that you will accept, and then we'll vote for the budget because it's kind of our budget too. And we're not in bed with you. We're not asking you for a cabinet position, but maybe they will. We'll find out over the next 10 days or so. But I think that's the deal that was cut, and it really puts the Constitutional Democratic Party in a really good position, and it really makes Mr. Noda look like a genius, having been able to snooker the two minor opposition parties and come out on top. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. The press will be reporting on it very heavily over the next couple of days, and then we'll figure out how it actually shakes out. I think there'll be a deal done before the end of this week. So I hope that's a responsive, Manabe-san.
Yes, I hope so too. And I also see in the news, and also some observers say that basically this is how we see Mr. Noda's political prowess.
Yes.
So, because, well, how can I say this in English? The word doesn't come up to me now, but he actually outplayed the other opposition parties, right? So,
well, actually, Maya, you were mentioning last week when we were talking, you said, why is Mr. Noda so quiet? Why is the Constitutional Democratic Party being so kind of backseat? We had a bit of a discussion about that, in fact.
Yes, indeed. And he came up on stage just quite unexpectedly, as a matter of fact, right? Yes. Okay. So thank you for this answer. And then we move on to the next one, which comes from, from Yuka. Yuka, good morning or good evening to you. Thank you for the question. So Yuka writes, I have heard that Mr. Ishiba invited Mr. Trump to the Osaka Expo when they met.
Sure, he did.
Yes, same thing. Mr. Trump's presence may increase the ticket sales. What is your take on this? Thank you for the answer in advance.
That's a great observation, because I think it's, when Mr. Ishiba was in Washington, D.C., he wasn't quite sure. Is it going to be Ishin? Is it going to be the Democratic Party? Is it going to be the Constitution? I'm not quite sure. But if it is Ishin and I bring President Trump to the expo, maybe that was one of the promises. I will bring the President of the United States to the expo, but you have to give me those 13 votes. Maybe that was part of it. But yeah, I thought it was somewhat unusual that they would focus on the expo. But the President of the United States says, I'm very interested in seeing the U.S. pavilion. I would like to observe that. And probably, given what we know about Mr. Trump, he just might make it. Also, during the expo, it's a 6-month exposition. So over a long 6-month period of time, it is possible that the president could come in. But also in April, probably in April or May, Mr. Ishiba is going to be visiting China to meet with the premier there. There's just so much going on in March. The defense minister from the United States will be visiting. The Brazilian president will be visiting on a state visit. And we're only 2 weeks away from March. So glorious March. Thank God. I can't wait for the flowers to start blooming. But we've survived winter together, I think, successfully without falling in the water. But yeah, I was interested in the fact that it reached the level of discussion and interpretation by the press, too, that the president was actually, I don't know if it's a formal invitation to come, because a formal invitation can be accepted or declined. I'm not quite sure about that, but I give it high marks that the President of the United States is is likely to visit the expo. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something that he would enjoy and get a lot of fanfare out of as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for this, and Christopher, thank you very much for for bringing my attention to Clubhouse again and what is going on there. Before we move on with some actions there, I would like to read out question by Cam. Cam, thank you for the question. Thank you for listening in, because I'm sure that you're extremely busy now, but it's always a pleasure to have you with us. And okay, so the question from Cam is. Okay. Did the meeting last week between Mr. Ishiba and Mr. Trump increase the likelihood of Ishiba remaining in power for the remainder of the year?
Well, Cam, I thought you were in the meeting personally. You should be reporting on that.
Yeah, I guess, but well, he was there probably, but we're here in Japan, so probably from the angle of Japanese politics, what's going on here? Let's try to answer that question,
Okay.
Timothy.
I think undoubtedly the fact that Mr. Ishiba had a good meeting with Donald Trump, yes, it enhances the possibility. I mean, even here on this show, we're talking about the possibility of him actually succeeding if he passes the budget, as we've predicted, if he is able to make some sort of a cooperation with one of the opposition parties, and if he has some sort of a viable relationship with the President of the United States, his possibility of being successful and continuing to be prime minister after the upper house elections is enhanced. And that means that the LDP does at least as well as it is right now. It's on par with the same number of upper house members in the LDP and in Komeito. Then he will remain as LDP president and as prime minister. Alternatively, if the LDP does poorly in the elections, I think he will be switched out. But that's a toss of the coin too, so we don't know. In the polls that were conducted, both by NHK and by Gigi, 12% of the people said, I want to remain with Mr. Ishiba as prime minister because there's nobody that could do the job except him. He's the only one that could do the job, and there's nobody else around. And we know that to be false, but it's just, I think, I don't know, it's, the population is just like that. Voters in particular, just not Japanese, but voters in particular, they're just fickle and kind of mealy-mouthed about switching out leaders. And that was only 12% as reported by NHK. So you can read a lot into that. But yes, in fact, I think, Cam, it greatly enhanced the prime minister's possibility of succeeding himself, because now we know he's handsome, he's fit, he's loved in Japan. Mr. Abe said so many nice things about him, and he is a leader for the future of Japan.
Right. Yes. Okay. So thank you for answering that. We move on to the next question. This comes from Jean-Sébastien Boire. Jean-Sébastien, thank you for watching this morning. And the question is, when the PM of Japan vows to invest in the US, which Japanese actors are actually financing which US recipients? Does it take the form of a combined action of public and private sectors through FDI or portfolio investments or bank loans? What is it? Is it asset buying or etc.?
That's a great question. Who is this from?
From Jean-Sébastien Boire.
Jean-Sébastien. You know, we talked about this a little bit when I was going through my my main briefing. I don't think, you know, the prime minister said we're going to invest $1 billion in the United States, $1 trillion in the United States. And of course, Mr. Trump loves that. He loves to hear that. That's what you're supposed to be saying. But I think that amount of money that he mentioned is the trajectory that Japan is going to spend anyway. I don't think it consists of any new investments. It might with regard to AI technology and maybe some chip manufacturing, but that's what they're doing in Japan. There is no need for the the Japanese to spend money in the United States to achieve that. They want to have that industry here. So there's still competition going on. But I think the amount of money that the prime minister mentioned is not, it sounds like it's new investment. It is not. It is what's projected to be invested over the next year in any event. So it was like a gift with actually not a whole lot of meaning. Anyway, that's my interpretation of because Japan it's not in a position to invest that much more heavily. Although one of the automobile manufacturers said they're going to expand in I think North Carolina. I forget which one, but they're going to expand production there. So maybe there's something to it, but I think something like that's already been on the schedule. It's been in the books. It's already been projected and interpreted for many, many months. So it's not something that they're going to do because the prime minister met with Donald Trump.
Right. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. And we are moving on to the next question from Akira Tokuhiro, Mr. On LinkedIn. So the first question from him is, will Akie, oh no, that's the second, sorry. When is Mr. Ishiba going to meet President Trump again? When is the next meeting with, who knows? Yes, we don't know. Probably there were.
Well, this one was a very hurried up meeting. And I think, this is the same thing going on with China too. If I visit your country, then you should come visit my country. It's not, it's pitching the ball back and forth, right? So China was supposed to have a state visit by Premier Xi just before COVID hit, or just around the time of COVID. He hasn't been on that state visit. But Mr. Ishiba has said, I'm going to be visiting with Xi probably in the spring, April about. So this is kind of contrary to what you should be doing. I visit you and then you visit me. You should have your state visit. And I think with Trump, or with the United States, I think probably the next meeting will be Trump visiting the United States. That sounds more
you mean
reasonable.
Ishiba-san visiting the United States? Is that what you?
Trump visiting Trump visiting Japan rather than Ishiba making another trip, which might be a state visit, but I don't see, not in the next couple of months where that's going to happen. You need to have a logical reason that supports that, and I don't see one coming on in the next couple of months.
Right. Okay. Yes. Well, maybe we can expect, once again, as you mentioned earlier, President Trump to come here during the expo, but this is a 6-month period, right?
That's right.
So anything can happen during that period, so nothing is set in stone, of course, and as they haven't talked about this, so chances are that, well, we've got 50% a chance of that. And then the next question from Akira Tokuhiro-san is, will Akie Abe have an official title and or role in future meetings with President Trump?
Yeah. I'm trying to be polite. I can't see it. I think she had some utility. She had some, joining in a state visit. Absolutely. But I think her role is very short. It was important that she met with Mr. Trump and had dinner at Mar-a-Lago. I think that maybe broke the ice, but I think we've already established that and moved on. I don't know if her role is of any prominent interest going forward. I could be wrong. If there's somebody else, Cam, if you know any differently, but I think that the utility that she had has been exercised, and we've moved on past that.
Well, okay, and thank you for that answer as well. We move to question 3 from the same Mr. Akira Tokuhiro. The question is, did Prime Minister Ishiba discuss the political void ongoing in South Korea with President Trump? Were there any discussions about what's going on in South Korea?
That's a great observation. So the Prime Minister has sent the Foreign Minister to Munich. He is in Munich today speaking with the South Korean, his counterparts in South Korea, as well as the United States. They're all meeting in Munich. And on the discussion is what we're doing with South Korea and how we're going to bolster them and support them. Previous President Yoon is still under a cloud, and the turmoil there is going to continue for the next couple of months. It's not going to shake out anytime soon. And the problem with South Korea is that Mr. Yoon was very favorable to Japan and very favorable to the United States. And the opposition, he only had a thin margin. And because of the opposition and the shenanigans that they were playing, he initiated martial law as a tactic to kind of quell things. It backfired, and they really went on the offensive. And now he's in deep trouble. So the relationship also is very shaky, because the opposition party is not as favorable to Japan and not as favorable to the United States as well. So it is an area of concern, but they are talking about it now. I'm sure it was a topic of conversation. The U.S.-Japan South Korea relationship is vital to having this region, calm and secure, and spreading out the military threat of if there's going to be some sort of kinetic action with regard to Taiwan. But North Korea is very much involved in that as well. So it's a very delicate period, and I hope that they make some good progress there. There's nothing more that I can report on that. Probably when they come back from Munich, there will be more news reports and things that we can discuss next week.
Yes, we'll continue watching this and reporting on this based on the news that is out there, or that is not out there, but still we get. Okay, and Timothy, so yes, we've got Manabe-san, thank you very much. So Manabe-san says that, yes, Mr. Noda is a genius politician.
Yes. Yeah.
In relation to, to his moves, very recent moves, of course. And okay, of course, the next thing I wanted to just touch upon is that, and how it actually impacts let's say, the image of the opposition parties is the accountant of Seiwakai. So
yes.
We know that he was, well, they tried to summon him, and so that he could report to the Budget Commission, and that was a call by the opposition parties, and he didn't show up. So, of course, as a citizen, as a private person, he was not obligated to do that. But didn't it actually diminish the, let's say, the weight of opposition parties who couldn't get him to be there, to show up and to report?
Okay, so a tactical decision was made last week, I think, by Mr. Noda personally. The Constitutional Democratic Party, Mr. Noda's party, has the chairman position in the Budget Committee, and the Budget Committee can insist that any Diet member show up, including the Prime Minister, to testify to this committee being held by the opposition party. And the opposition chairman, Mr. Aizawa, no, June.
Oh, Mr. Jun Azumi.
Azumi. Mr. Azumi insisted that the LDP produce the accountant, and they kicked and screamed. They said he can't, it requires the full vote. It requires the unanimous vote. They kicked and screamed. The decision was made not to push forward on it, because because of that issue, the budget didn't pass and the fight continued, the Constitutional Democratic Party would be blamed by the LDP. And since the NHK can produce these kinds of hit pieces easily, probably they would have suffered more damage. The reason why we didn't pass the budget, the reason why we're in controversy, is because those guys and that chairman of the Budget Committee, he was insisting on this and that. And of course, we couldn't accommodate it. So I think what they did was they just decided to throw that one out. So I think that's a dead issue. But as a consequence of that, he got something on the other end of it. So I think it's all interrelated. But I think also, even if the Seiwakai accountant wanted to testify, to clear his name, to tell people, I was ordered, they told me to do it, and it's not my fault, it's not going to happen. and the LDP could have made it happen, or they could have prevented it from happening, as we see the result today. So I think it was a tactical decision by the Constitutional Democratic Party to stop pushing that one. Even if it wins and they do have a testimony, it's not going to produce the benefit that they had hoped it would. So let's move on to other issues. And it looks like now, as of Friday, they've pulled a rabbit out of the hat. And if it continues to go forward, then the budget will pass, and it'll be a new day. It'll be a new world.
Yeah, that was an interesting insight. Thank you for sharing. We move on to one more question from Akira Tokuhiro-san, and also a comment from him, and also a question we have from Kei Izawa-san. Thank you both for the questions. I will just move on to question 4 from Akira-san. What is the delicate position of Japan with respect to Canada and Mexico? Regarding this question, will Japan just sit back and see what happens, since these countries are on President Trump's radar? In other words, Japan does not need to get involved directly. What are your thoughts on this, Timothy?
I think Japan, with regard to Mexico in particular, because they are supplying lots of services and products and parts to Mexico. Mexico is combining the parts and then selling it because they receive a tariff vacation, a tariff holiday from the United States. As long as it's being built in Mexico, it's a different tariff that's applied than if it was coming in directly from Japan. So they changed their strategy from exporting into the United States. They export parts and services and components to Mexico. Mexico combines them and puts them into units, into sellable units, and then Mexico exports. And that was by design to enhance Mexico's trade with the United States and to increase their standard of living and a lot of different things. Canada is a different deal. Canada is mostly an export market. And I don't think the Japanese have much manufacturing in Canada, but also any export of parts and services that they have to Canada, they also have a similar U.S.-Canada trade deal that the Japanese can benefit from. So I think what the question is seeking is, isn't it better for the Japanese just to let this one slide, not to contribute too much to it, because that bullseye could be coming to Japan too if you start, contributing to the controversy that the United States is trying to solve. Just back off and let this thing be solved. And I think that's probably the more clever mood, and probably the one that the Japanese will follow. But it's got Kasumi Gaseki really worried because of the amount and the volume of trade that goes to Mexico is not insubstantial. So, and Japan needs every avenue of revenue generation that it can get. The budget that was submitted by the Constitutional Democratic Party is 3 trillion yen more than what the LDP Komeito proposed. But probably the LDP will accept that, even though they have to spend another 3 trillion. In any event, if they accommodated Ishin no Kai, or if they accommodated the Democratic Party for the people, the budget is going to increase as well. But I think this one satisfies most of it. They get the 13 extra votes and maybe some extra benefits. We will find out later what the deal actually consisted of. But this is the first time, like I said, that the LDP has accepted a counter proposal on the budget in 29 years. So this is a remarkable feat.
It is indeed. Well, thank you for answering the question. And I will move on to Keizawa-san's question. And after that, we've got one more question about geopolitics here from Hiroko-san. So the question from Izawa-san is, J.D. Vance and Hegseth surprised European allies with the US stance, prompting some in Europe to consider uniting to counter what is seen as Trump's pro-Russian approach. In light of these developments, what actions do you think Japan might take?
So the meeting that Kay is talking about, hi Kay, Thanks for contributing. The meeting that he's talking about was a policy speech made by J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance's first foreign policy trip and his first policy speech. It was wide-ranging. It was very frank. It really teed off a lot of the Europeans on who the hell do you think you're talking to? And I think the United States is taking a vastly different approach to NATO, to the EU, and they came in very strong. I mean, J.D. Vance sounds like he had his talking points, and the United States is unashamed about, telling the Europeans, friends tell friends, what they're doing wrong and what they should correct. And I think the Europeans took umbrage at that. But I think things will settle down. What's going on in the United States and the role of Donald Trump is historic, and will be remembered for many, many years, hundreds of years. What he has done, he's come in and he's really upset things that were being done over the last 12, 15 years in a very dramatic way. I mean, look at what he's done over the last 3 weeks. He's been president of the United States. So I think there will be challenges coming up from the Democrats and from people who are offended or diminished by some of the policies and some of the executive orders. But it is unmistakable what the United States is doing in foreign policy, in trade, and in economy, and in just bringing, what Elon Musk is doing with trying to find waste and abuse in federal spending. It is just remarkable. We've never seen anything like this before. So I thought paying attention to what J.D. Vance said, and if you haven't seen it, you should listen to that speech, and also listen to the commentary coming out of some of the other EU leaders, because it does show a distinct difference of view, and also a little bit of they feel, you guys have just taken over. We like Biden a lot more. He was much more accommodating to us, and we like Obama even more. And now we're feeling a little bit like you guys have eaten more spinach than you should consume. So it's an interesting dynamic that I think has not played itself out yet. Thanks, Kay.
Indeed. Yeah, we are going to see what happens next, because it seems that there is a split in the European Union leadership. And I think that through that policy speech, J.D. Vance actually voiced the opinions of the minority of leaders in the European Union. So, but still, it's interesting to observe it. And let's continue reporting on this as well. Even though it's probably not directly related to Japan, but it might have some repercussions on the Japanese.
Oh, it's definitely going to have repercussions. The other issue that came up was Donald Trump apparently had a phone call with Putin, and the proposal of having a meeting, the two of them, in Saudi Arabia in the near future. And in the near future, in Trump terms, that could be within 3 weeks. And so I think, and he also said as a campaign promise, I'm going to end that bloody war, very quickly, within 24 hours when I become president of the United States, it'll be over. And so I think he is determined to make it, and even if it doesn't end it, it's going to settle things. And, the United States is contributing tremendously to that war effort. The Japanese are as well. So yes, they are impacted by the decisions the United States has and what this change of policy is going to generate.
Well, thanks a lot for that. And moving on to Hiroko-san's questions on LinkedIn. So China's government has removed buoys that were installed within Japan's exclusive economic zone around the Senkaku Islands in Okinawa Prefecture. Is this related, or does it have anything to do with Prime Minister Ishiba's meeting with President Trump? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it probably does, but more importantly, they did remove the buoy, but not all of them. They removed the ones that were inside the exclusive economic zone. It has been complained at the highest levels, and I think it's more related to Ishiba going to China. and making that kind of overture. Like I said before, it's really not Ishiba's turn to go to China. It's Xi's turn to come to Japan. And so for him to kind of skip over that and to it does feel like a bit of kowtowing. I'm going to come visit you, and I want to talk about trade and our relationship, how rich our relationship is, and the history between our two countries, and be friends. And remove the goddamn boys. They are a violation, and they are in our exclusive economic zone, and it causes concern for us, and you should remove them. And they did. So I think that's the more important thing is Ishiba going to China, I believe.
Right. I think that's very typical of the way how Asian nations deal with specific issues, and they basically avoid confrontation or open confrontation. So you can see how this dynamic, also cultural dynamic, is playing here in this particular case. Well, right. So thank you very much for this, Timothy. It looks like we have gone through all the questions, and you can now be free. Once, yes, free to fall. Right. Okay. So, all right. Let me see. It looks like we don't have any other comments and questions at this point of time. If anything comes up while we're closing, we'll address the comment or question next week. Okay, yes. Once near the buoys near the Yanaguni Island have not been removed yet. So this is from Hiroko-san. Right. Okay. Thanks a lot for this. And to everybody who commented with us, to us, and shared your thoughts and questions here. Thanks a lot for your time. Now it is no, it's not Wednesday. It's Sunday morning. It's a beautiful day. And Timothy wants to show his background. Here we go. You can enjoy it as well. So this is Katsuyama, isn't it?
This is beautiful Katsuyama. Yeah, it's a big mountain that prevents the Wi-Fi from reaching the port, and which is why I need to put the cell phone in a plastic bag and hoist it up to the mast so that I have stronger Wi-Fi, and then I have to sit out on the deck, even though it might be raining, in order to, I mean, just the things that I sacrificed to do this program for you, Maya.
I know, and I do appreciate this, all the things you do for this program, really very much. So I know you also think that I want you to fall off board all the time. Sometimes it's true, sometimes because I have no other way of, saying,
yes,
or something like that. Right. Okay, so that's all for the moment. And thank you once again, Timothy, for preparing for the briefing and briefing us into what is going on in Japanese politics. To everybody who is still with us or is going to watch us later today or next week, please remember to give us a like or subscribe.
Hit like.
Oh, yes, let us know that you have been there as well. And
that's the only currency we charge.
That's the only currency we charge, indeed.
Yes.
So happy Sunday and all the best. Very successful week, of course. Now, another shout out to our two sponsors here. We've got